the entire city all were zoned for the same school system. The richest of the rich went to school with the poorest of the poor, the black, the white, and everything in between. I didn't grow up in a pick a side environment. I grew up in a make it work environment.
We all have problems, but some are hungrier than most. We gotta do better than social media posts. They say we can't touch, but we can still underhand.
Well, my name is Alvin Garrett, and my roots go back to the church, Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Growing up as a preacher's kid, just being in the church environment, and not your typical Southern church, but just a different type of Southern church, where my dad was a non-traditional, non-denominational pastor, so not very religious. It was all about love and hope and freedom. And so I found that not only was that the place of my love for music, but that was also my where the birthplace of my love for my philosophy in life and the undertones that you hear in my music. But just sitting and watching the musicians play in church inspired me as a young lad to pick up a bass guitar, and from there just learning how to play. And that honestly was what I've done the most of my life is as a bass guitarist. But that led me into becoming a songwriter, producer, and here I am now as an artist, 20 years after officially taking this journey as a professional musician, Grammy-nominated songwriter now, performing my own music here, there, and everywhere. And it's exciting. It's exciting to know that starting from, pretty much Alabama, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, that I've been able to reach other corners of the world with my music.
That is so cool, Alvin. I think a lot of us songwriters, when we hear someone is a Grammy-nominated songwriter, we're like, "Ooh, what was the path? What was the path? Like, how did you get from point A to point B with that?" So you picked up the bass guitar. What happened in that interim that you've been able to see the level of success that you've seen?
Well, I'll say it's been my ability to evolve that has gotten me to this point. By loving bass guitar, but not defining myself as a bass guitarist. That's what's allowed me to grow and explore new things and learn new things and build on the foundation of being a bass guitarist. And so from there, like I say, once I started producing music, I found that, okay, I'm a poet a little bit myself. Let me mix this thing up. And then of course, just taking from influences from being around other artists, other musicians, and aspiring to grow, sort of led me to discover my own capabilities. And just by being so fluid in terms of being willing to grow and not just say, well, I'm a bass guitarist, that's it. Let me buy a new bass. I say, no, I can be whatever I want to be. And that goes back to the teachings that my father taught me, not just in church, but just in life. He said, you define yourself, not the world around you. So if you want to be an NFL football player, just work a little harder. And even if you don't make it there, you still go to college. And that's what happened for me. So he just taught me to define myself. And so, and I think that's been core to my evolution to become, like I said, a Grammy-nominated songwriter, because I was willing not to let one thing define me and my dreams and my goals define my path.
Yeah, there's a lot when you're discovering your musical identity. You're taking pieces of all these artists and wonderful performers that you see around you. I wonder what some of those people were for you. Because when I listened to your stuff, the first song I listened to was Beat Beat off of your new album, which I love. I hope we can include a video for it at the end, or maybe a clip at the beginning. And my head immediately went, oh, Curtis Mayfield. Yes. And he's not listed as an influence on your site, your website, but there's Al Greene and there's Sam Cooke. And I'm like, oh, yep, those guys too. So who was in that slate of inspirational figures for you?
You know what? Is more of a what type of singer, what type of artist influenced me? It was, like you say, Curtis Mayfield, of course, Sam Cooke, Al Greene, all of those were artists that have a certain spirit about them. And I didn't really learn to appreciate what they stood for until I got older and actually started becoming more of an artist myself and discovered they had influenced me. Because growing up, my cognitive awareness was, oh, who's playing bass on the album? Like, who's the bass player? Because at that time in my career growth, I was sort of aligning myself. Let me find out who's playing bass for Earth, Wind, and Fire. Let me see who's playing bass for this artist. And so because that was my main thing, I was still hearing this great soulful music and aspiring to what it made me feel. So when I discovered my own voice as an artist, those influences were there. You know, I didn't grow up saying, oh, I want to sing like Curtis Mayfield. I want to sing like Al Green. It's when I started singing like Alvin Garrett, you heard those influences because of what they stood for and what their music means to this day. I said, oh, I'm in that spirit. You know what I mean? And so I can honestly say that I grew up listening to Sam Cooke all the time, but I aspired after him once I realized, wait a minute, I make people feel like Sam Cooke. I make people feel like Al Green. So, but it was me finding myself in that connection.
It's so funny. I think of myself early on in my own music career, and I see a girl who was just busying herself trying to be a singer that she wasn't. You know, we see these people, like whether it's Beyonce or Adele. Like I remember just being obsessed with Adele and being like, why can't I sound just like her? Like it was a problem for me that I didn't sound like her. And it really wasn't until I tried to start sounding like myself that even like the little bits of positive Adele influence, not that I'm even like the Adele imitator over here, I'm really not, but like those little bits of those people I admired could even come out because I'd been so busy trying to be an impersonator, and I was missing out on the whole thing that made me. I wasted a lot of time, I think, early on, and a lot of other young singers do, I think. So I really like what you're saying. One thing that stood out to me is that you referenced what Sam Cooke stood for, what Al Green stood for. And I wonder what you mean by that. Are you speaking artistically, or are you speaking perhaps even sociopolitically, as we may or may not know a bit about what those guys were influential in the movements of their time? What do you mean when you say that?
It's a little bit of both, right?
Okay.
It's what they make you feel as the listener, starting there from the purity of the art. I am a purist when it comes to art. Like I don't believe in sort of desecrating a person's art because of their social political affiliations or who they were as a person. I listen to the art, starting first.
Wow. There you go. That puts you in a unique boat nowadays, I feel like.
Absolutely.
Where I'm like canceled, not pressing play on that Spotify.
Absolutely. Like you can't truly appreciate all art if you have to preface the art by the artist. Like if you have to qualify the art by the artist.
Artists are such broken people.
Yes,
we're such broken people. Yeah.
It's been that way since the beginning of time with all art, paintings. You know, cars are designed artfully by really broken people. So that's just my take on it. So when I listen to those artists, is what do they make me feel? You know, when I hear a change is going to come, right? What does that make me feel? When I hear Let's Stay Together by Al Green, how many families do I see dancing and loving on each other? You know, certainly Black families who celebrate each other over barbecue to the sound of Al Green. When his voice is heard through his music, it invokes positive, proud feelings of family and love and togetherness. I'm not really thinking about Al Green in his personal life, right? When I say I aspire to make people feel like that when they hear my music, when I say what they stood for, what their music stands for, you know. And then once I learned a little more about Sam Cooke's story and his history and what inspired him to start his own record label and how he was creating intellectual property owners back then as a Black owned record label. Whoa, now I'm inspired from that perspective, you know, not so much judging my inspiration on how they lived their life, what they did. And I know in today's time, that is a qualifier for appreciation, but not for me. You know what I'm saying? In terms of what inspires me and the choices that I make and what I want to do with my music. So when people hear Alvin Garrett, whether they know me or not, I want them to feel something, right? Say, oh, beat, wow. When he said, you know, we got to do more than just a social media post. Wow, that made me think, you know, so that's the lane that I travel in with my music and my artistry.
Yeah. There's kind of an analogy here that I might make to actors and actresses who might play an amazing and inspiring character in your favorite film. And you draw something really meaningful and beautiful from that. And if they're a scumbag in real life, or if they're amazing in real life, that stuff is separate. And so it's a bonus if they're a very inspirational person in real life too. But that movie made you feel something, regardless of how this man behaves around women, or his views on XYZ issue, which are very important in his personal sphere, but don't really necessarily have an impact on how that given piece of art makes you feel. And it's hard to parse that for me. And there's definitely been a ton of conversation about it in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you would share a little bit about your political backstory now that we've talked about your musical origins. I know that growing up in Alabama, you've had a unique slate of experiences that has really shaped your perspective on getting along with those who have differences.
Right. So I didn't grow up in a political background growing up. Honestly, my father was like, I don't do politics, I do church.
He's a wise man, very wise man.
He didn't get involved. I'm being honest. He wasn't the type of person that said, hey, you need to vote, you need to get involved with politics. So honestly, it wasn't until I got, older in college that I started becoming aware of, politics. Now, I did not realize that I had a major experience that would shape my views on politics in the world by the high school I went to, in the school system in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where the entire city all were zoned for the same school system, right? So if you were across the river, the richest of the rich went to school with the poorest of the poor, the black, the white, and everything in between in the same school system from 6th grade until graduation. Right? So imagine how influential it is to be in the same school with people from all different backgrounds from 6th grade through graduation. That is a very unique perspective that you have. I was the only Black male in advanced classes with all white kids, right? But I hung out with the Black kids, but I didn't grow up on the West Side, which was a little bit more impoverished. I was middle class. But I was around everybody. So I had to face a lot of fears, a lot of biases, a lot of prejudices that I did not know. I had to talk to white kids who never been around Black people before, but they would ask me because they were comfortable. Like, so do Black people think this? I'm like, hey, let me tell you, right? So by growing up in a world where I was forced, and we were forced to be around each other, whether we liked it or not, we learned something that very few people have an opportunity to learn. And it's how to interact with people that are different. And so that is sort of the foundation to my political beliefs and how I see the world. And it's not red and blue. It's not black and white. I say I'm a Demo-publican, or I'm a Republican, whatever you want to call it. If I had to be honest, because regardless of where I vote when I go in a box or a booth or whatever, I have certain principles. Right? I have certain principles that are unique to me that may not fit squarely in this box or squarely in that box. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, you have 2 boxes, 2 sides to choose. You know what I mean? So for me, I didn't grow up in a pick a side environment. I grew up in a make it work environment. Make it work.
I love that.
Right? And so even now in Tuscaloosa, I have guys that I played football with. They come from the most wealthy of backgrounds, are helping to pioneer change for people on the other side of town who said, man, my business never would have grown if I hadn't played football with you. If I didn't know where Black people lived, I know these streets. You know what I'm saying? I understand the power of knowing the community. White male who played football with me. You know what I mean? Because we were zoned to play football together. And now you see so much rezoning. And now people are not ever getting to an understanding of how can we make this world work, not how we can all agree, because that'll never happen, but how can we make it work? And that's what we did in Central Tuscaloosa, where I grew up. And it's not something that is usual, it's not something that is normal, but it's what I experienced. And Unfortunately, they rezoned that school across social economic lines. And now Tuscaloosa looks like everywhere else. Black kids, the poor kids from a certain community go to a certain school. Middle class, upper middle class go to a certain school. Upper class go to a certain school. And you find that they don't know each other. And it's harder to make it work when you're not around people from different backgrounds.
Yeah, there's no face to the name or face to the label. I think this is common with a lot of people who are in bridge building spaces like you or like me. Like I live between two worlds. I live between the North Dakota oil field and the LA music scene. And that's not an experience a lot of people get. You know, your average city kid didn't grow up with access to people who really care about having firearms or have, you know, any given value that you'll find more commonly in a rural community. But because I have faces of people that I love in both of these communities, well, why would I hate this entire community? That community has people that I love in it, and this one does too. And like, you know what I mean? Just the simple act of having a pair of eyes to look into goes such a long way in what you just described of that making it work that we have to do. It's not about agreeing, it's about making it work.
Absolutely.
Your team fed me a little line here. They wanted me to ask you about your father's role in the coal mines. I have no idea what they were talking about, but my ears pricked up because I'm like, ooh, mining. I work in the energy sector, so I'm like, I know a little bit about mining. What was going on there? Tell me about that.
Right, so I talk a lot about my father being a pastor, but I rarely ever talk about him being a coal miner. And, you know, my dad, you know, growing up, you know, in the South, you know, during the civil rights, Jim Crow era, you know, he had an opportunity to go play sports, but he said, I could make more money going to work in the coal mine. But in Alabama, you're Black and male going into a white male driven environment. And of course, he faced a lot of, you know, what you would face back then. But my father being who he was, he said, you know, how am I going to win these people over who may be afraid of me, who may not like me? So he took Dreamland ribs to work. He always went to work with a slab of ribs. And so he became the guy that always brought everybody's favorite ribs. And so that was his way of breaking down barriers. Like, hey, can I have some? Hey, I brought them for you. So,
oh, I love this, Alvin.
So he became
unity through ribs.
Yes, literally unity through Dreamland ribs. And that was how he broke down barriers to where, you know, a lot of people who may never have become friends with a Black male back then fell in love with him as a person because he owned it. He's like, I can't allow this environment to change me. I'm going to change this environment. So what do I have to do? It's an act of love, an act of kindness that says, I'm not going to let what you're pushing towards me change who I am. Let me give back through love and kindness in the form of ribs for him. So,
in the form of ribs.
In the form of ribs. So it was the principle of what he did back then. And as he shared that with me, that says, you know, you're responsible for your place in the world. The world is not responsible for you. You have to change the environment. And I always look at now when I get on an elevator, I say, hey, I'm a Black male. Let me presume this person is uncomfortable. How can I change it in this 20 to 30 seconds? Can I smile? Can I say roll tide, depending on where I am? What can I do in this brief encounter to change this space, enlighten this space that I'm in this elevator? And that's a microcosm of the world we live in. And like you say, you don't have to fully understand everybody's issues. That's not a requirement. And I think we've gone too far expecting people to understand every single piece of your experience. Just let me understand the human aspect of your experience, right? If I start there, then we can connect because all humans experience fear of the unknown. So let me humanize this encounter on the elevator. Let me humanize this job with some ribs, right?
Every time you say ribs, I just crack up.
Hey, we love our ribs down here in the
we
South.
Love it. That's so funny. I love it, Alvin. And I'm so struck by how much this message in particular would appeal to conservatives, because you're speaking to personal responsibility, which for some reason, I don't know why certain sides have monopolies on certain ideas. They really shouldn't, and really don't. But that what you just said opens the door to a conservative to hear you out on something that they might not as naturally take to, because they said, oh, well, Alvin is a gentleman who will take responsibility regardless of what the world is doing or thinking or saying about him. And I know that's deeply appealing to my fellow Reds. So
I told you
good
I was
on
a
you.
Republican. I told you I was a
The
Republican.
Republican. We like that language. It's good. It's good. Yeah. This reminds me of a story that you told me about something that happened to you recently in Georgia. And I wonder if you would share that story with us. It's this dicey encounter that you had on the street, and the implications from a conflict resolution standpoint and the seeing humanity in your brother and the other standpoint are really profound. So if you would please go ahead and share that.
You know, when you get into politics, and it's a funny story that just happened in Columbus, Georgia. And I was wondering if I was going to have a chance to slip this in, based on what we're talking about. Went into this bar just to sort of get some food and grab a drink after the show with a couple of friends, and we're all Black. And the bartender says, "Hey, look, we're closed. You know, bar's closed. We already had last call." And you saw a group people, you know, pretty full of patrons that were still there, and it was like, "We're not serving anymore." So we leave. Then we see couple of white guys walk in, and me and my guy, we just stopped and looked through the window. Let's take a look. And we waited. And I said, is he about to serve him a beer? And so I'm sitting here like, oh my God. And he took their money. And me and my guy, we walked back in. And so we go in and I sit down at the bar. So obviously at this point, he's like, oh crap. And so I said, he's like, I said, so you're just close to us? He's like, no, man. He's like, hey man, look, I know this looks bad. He said, you know, y'all looking all fancy. I figured y'all want to come in and kind of hang out. You know what I'm saying? These guys, man, I just get them a beer, get them on out of here. And I said, that's not how you handle that. I said, you treat all customers the same. I said, regardless, I said, if it's closing for us, it's closing for them. I said, if it's open for a drink for them, it's open for a drink for us. And I spoke just as kindly to him, and I looked at him with a certain look and let him know. I said, this ain't good, man. I said, don't do this. And I said, and we just got up and we left. We didn't cause a scene. I didn't curse at him. I didn't, call him a racist. I didn't make a big scene. I didn't go on social media. I didn't threaten him. We walked down to another restaurant. As we were getting ready to order our food, he comes in. He said, man, I followed you down the street. He said, man, I feel like shit. He said, man, I feel like absolute shit. He said, I just couldn't have you leave and thinking that that's me. He said, I knew y'all wanted, I just felt like y'all wanted to hang out. And I said, you weren't wrong. We did want to hang out. And he said, but I could have handled it better. He said, I could have handled it differently. He said, but he said, the way you pointed out to me, I felt horrible. He said, I just couldn't let y'all get away thinking that I'm that type of person. He said, because I'm not. He said, I'm not. And he said, I've never done this before. And I said, and I gave him a hug, right? We embraced. And I said, man, why don't you check out my music? And he said, I'm gonna follow you, man. He said, thank you so much. And he walked away with forgiveness. But I also walked away having forgiven. And it was a beautiful moment, because it could have gone a totally different way. He could have been forever seen as the racist guy that wouldn't serve a group of Black people, but he served the white. It fit perfectly into the mainstream narrative. What's going on out here today? But I took responsibility to say, no. Let me first let him know how I feel. Let me not leave here, take this burden with me. Let me go back and politely, respectfully say, hey man, it's disrespectful. You should do better. And in that loving, authoritative voice, he heard me and he was convicted and said, let me come let you know that I feel bad about this. And I feel like if we can do more of that, you know what I'm saying? As opposed to just saying that he's a racist and saying, oh, no, there's nothing you can say. I'm canceling you now because of what you did. You should have served us. You should have. But simply his thing was, hey man, I thought about it wrong. I did, because y'all look so fancy. He was actually in his mind complimenting us. That's literally how he felt. Like, y'all looking real nice, and these guys, they just gonna grab a beer. He said, matter of fact, I gave them a cheaper beer than they thought they were getting, so I can get them out of here. You know what I'm saying? So from his perspective, he really saw it that way. But without my input, he wasn't able to see a more complete worldview. And so we did each other a service by interacting in that way. And so,
wow, we did each other a service.
we did. We did. He did me a service by coming back and saying, I feel like shit. You know what I'm saying? That was a service to me and my people, that he actually came back saying that I feel horrible, that I made you all feel this way. And we both walked away free. See what I'm saying? And I feel like that's a model for how we should interact across party lines, across, views on sexuality, gender, hey, let's interact in a way to where we both walk away free.
Yeah. So talk to me about, it sounds like in your career, and I haven't listened to this album, but you had an album 2 albums ago. What was it called? It was
called The Awakening.
The Awakening. I have that written down, but thank you for grabbing that for me. The Awakening. And then it was followed by your new album that just came out
The Lightness
a month ago,
of Love.
The Lightness of Love.
Mm-hmm.
And that first one is kind of a backdrop, I think, to the second one a little bit. But tell me more about that.
Well, the music that I've been writing most of my life as an artist is just a reflection of my experiences, my thoughts. And of course, when the George Floyd incident happened, I observed, I felt what I felt, but I always take a different perspective. Like I mentioned, going to school with any and everybody taught me to listen more than talk. And so I saw the world, I saw things happening. And I said, instead of just getting on social media, chiming in, let me sing about it. And I said, something's different this time. And it was what I was feeling. And it's what everybody was feeling like, okay, this is not the first time this has happened. It was gruesome, but it's not the first time. And if you care about this, you care about it all the time. But why does it matter to them this time? Why did the world see it? So that was the question I had in my mind. And say, why is it more visible now? Is it because we've all been running from the same enemy called the virus, the coronavirus? At that time, we hadn't politicized the virus. It was just killing everybody. So we all experienced the same fear as humans. So we were able to identify this pain that most people would never have seen otherwise, right? And so when my neighbors who are white say, oh my God, what they did to George Floyd. You didn't see what they did to Philando Castile? You didn't see that one? So I asked myself, something's different this time, but what is it? And that sent me on a journey of exploration. And I captured that in that album. What is going on?
Which album is this?
The Awakening. The Awakening.
This is The Awakening.
This was in 2020, correct. And so when you listen to that, you'll hear that experience of asking the questions and then even telling my neighbors, hey, here's why you're feeling something. Here's what's going on. Here's how close this looks to animal cruelty, right? Why did this one catch your eye? Because it looks a little like animal cruelty. But we have to humanize my neighbors, not see them as animals who can be shot and I feel nothing. But if I strangle them, I think of a dog or another animal. And you don't even kill animals that way, right? See, you have to look at that. And that's what, instead of me saying, let me go online and talk, get in the streets, I said, let me make a song about it. And I called it 2 Fifths. So you still got me working for my 2 fifths. You know what I mean? You say 3 fifths back in the day, but I'm still feeling like I'm working for an equality. I'm working for an equivalence that I'm simply a father. I'm simply a brother. I'm simply a neighbor. I'm simply human. Why do I have to have a 2 fifths differential? As a Black man in America. So I wrote a song about it. And so that's what The Awakening was about me capturing that time in my life and my observations and speaking in a way through music that could be heard and felt and cause introspect. And of course, from that heaviness, because that was a very heavy period for everybody. So what's going to get me out of this? and I started singing about love, just thinking about my children, and during the pandemic, the lessons that I taught them about gratefulness and how to get through a tough time and how we created all these adventures together, and just the feeling of lightness that I felt dancing around the house with my kids, listening to my music, led me on a path of creating an album to just simply capture the lightness that I was feeling. And that's when you listen to that project, you'll hear a distinct difference in the heaviness of the awakening, in the introspect, and the lightness of love, because they reflected where I was at those periods of time, in my response to the heaviness, which I always say, if I can find a way to embrace love, then those burdens begin to lift. I can live a more light existence in a heavy world. So that's a personal process for me. Forgiveness. Let me forgive you for this first, so that I don't carry this burden away from you. And you may not even know how you treated me, but if I lead with forgiveness, I'm free. So it's a process.
100%, Alvin. What is your favorite track off of The Lightness of Love?
My favorite
There's so many good ones. It's such a good record. Everybody should listen to all of them.
Yeah, I'll say, I have to say, on any given day, my first mind was this song called In It. It's a beautiful love song. It says, we can be under a bridge or in a house on a hill, no matter where it is, as long as we're in it together. And, you can take that message wherever you want to go. It can be a political message, or it can be a relationship message, but it doesn't matter where we are if we are in this together. And so it's a beautiful love song, but it can mean so much more than just speaking to a lover or relationship. It really apply to life in so many ways.
I like those songs that could go either way. I have some songs that were actually worship songs or songs alluding to God that most people interpret as romantic, but every now and then there's a person who understands the original intention, and it doesn't matter either way. Like if they want to interpret it one way or the other, that's fine.
Right.
But, I like the double meaning. It's like a secret. It's a little Easter egg.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Go on.
Just to add to what you just said, the lightness of love is actually an Easter egg. For me, it's the presence of God. It's how I describe the presence of God in love. It's a lightness. So it is sort of, an analogy to, so that's sort of an Easter egg that you mentioned that. And for me, it's like, okay, the presence of God, if I want to be lifted, I want my burdens lifted, let me meditate, let me get in that space to where it's not as heavy. So the lightness of love is that Easter egg for the presence of God. And through R&B music, you feel the same way. You feel that lightness. You're like, wow, what is this feeling? I'm, okay. But it's the same feeling no matter how you speak of it. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Alvin. That's wonderful. I just personally, I'm such a background vocals geek. And so I wanted to tell you that I love the background vocals. I don't even want to call them background vocals because it's just like it's so integral to the actual songs. Yeah. Some of them, those harmonies, man, they're so rich. They're so rich. It doesn't surprise me at all that you grew up in a church setting musically because, the sophistication, everybody needs to go listen. I'm trying to think of which song was I really rocking to last night. It's probably My Gift to You.
Oh, yeah.
To be honest. That has a lot of, they're just so good. It's a really good record overall. Congratulations, Alvin.
Thank you.
Excellent. I wanted to talk to you about some of your community service work, because I know direct involvement, like hands-on involvement in your community is another way that you've been engaging and that you've been finding to build bridges and make a positive impact. So talk to me about any of your community service work. It seems like there's so much of it. I know you've got something called The Right Life, but wherever you want to start.
Well, I sort of discovered during the pandemic, honestly, sort of a knack or a mission for me, because I haven't always been sort of a philanthropist-minded person. I've always been community driven, but more through business empowerment, through entertainment. But in terms of me finding something that my heart goes out to, my heart is in, that I would do for $0 any and every day, was when I found the Dannon Project. And actually, I'm in our Montgomery office right now, Montgomery, Alabama. We have a location here, and the Dannon Project is a reentry program, a workforce development agency that serves primarily at-risk youth and young adult population, most of which in and out of the justice system, fighting against recidivism through holistic services, holistic wellness treatment, and job preparation. And not just job, let me fix that, career development, because we don't do jobs at the Dannon Project, we do career development. But it's a beautiful, redemptive process to see a person go from the worst circumstances in life to becoming a productive citizen of their community and their own families. And so through my songwriting program called The Right Life, I've been an integral part of that process for a lot of our participants, because music in so many ways is sort of the soundtrack of life, right? And if you think about the culture that leads you to prison, culture that leads you to crime, no knock on any type of genre of music, but the lyrics, the lifestyle, if they align, a lot of times it leads you to death, jail, imprisonment, that type of thing. So in this program, we've deconstructed that musical connection to lifestyle and choices and saying, hey, let's go through the songwriting, the music process that you love, but let me change your language. Let me change your mindset. So they come to class and they let their frustration and let their anger out. They use all of those words that, that many people say, oh, right? But when we talk and we go through the process, I say, now explain what you mean. Explain your experience. Tell me your journey. Now let's translate it in a way that I can get it on the radio. Translate it in a way that you can tell your peers at work about your experience. And what I found and what we have found is that they can easily translate, remove the vulgarity, remove the violence, remove the drugs, and tell their story, right? So The Right Life is not just about a songwriting program, it's about a life coaching process through music to teach people that you can communicate, you can fit into the world around you, you can deal with your anger, you can deal with your perceptions and share your story and make people less afraid of engaging you, right? And so you take that and you pair it with the wonderful, wonderful things that they're being taught about how to deal with the poverty mindset, healthcare issues, mental health issues that the Dannon Project teaches and pushes. It's just been an amazing connection with this line of work and line of service, shall I say, in the community that I live, and also expanding into other states and communities where, we're partnering with other, people because of the innovative things that we're doing at the Dannon Project.
Wow. So it sounds like there's this whole slate of services that's being offered to these people who are in this challenging circumstance. And one of those many, right up there with healthcare, right up there with poverty mindset, is songwriting. Is that correct? That is so cool. See, I love that because that's nourishment for the soul.
Yes.
It's such important nourishment for the soul. Do you have any specific stories of individuals that you met through that program? I don't know how much you're allowed to share about individuals, but.
Absolutely. During the pandemic, there was this one young man who expressed, matter of fact, he was rolling one up during the class. Right?
You're kidding me.
Oh, he was like, roll this up.
Like, he's like your dad, like bringing ribs for everyone, but it's like just for.
But everybody's in their home environment, we're on Zoom, and he's in his garage, and he's like rolling it up. Man, you gonna just roll one up in class? And he's like, man, he said, I have to, I can't stop. And one of our students jumped in and said, whoa, don't tell me what you can't do. She said, I was addicted to heroin my entire life. She said, but I prayed, I made a commitment, and I asked God to help me get over this addiction. And she said, in 3 months, I'm not on heroin anymore. Don't tell me what you can't do. And he was like, oh, okay, that's real. Come back next week to class. He didn't have it with him. And I was like, I see you ain't got your, And he was like, yeah, I've been clean for about 3 days now. He said, I heard her. He said, I heard her and I've been doing it. And he went another week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, clean, cold turkey from a songwriting class where his peer simply said, no, you are not allowed to tell me you can't stop smoking weed when I stop using heroin. And that was a story that was so inspiring. And we wrote a song from that experience called Reflections. These are my reflections, and he was an amazing rapper, very energetic, and he was able to share his story, but his own personal triumph began with that interaction through collaboration in a music class. So that's a story that sort of shows the power of what can happen with the right life through this type of engagement.
Oh, absolutely. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Alvin.
Yeah.
Where can we support The Right Life or the Dannon Project, or hear some of these songs, or are they published and out?
Yeah, actually, two of those songs are published. You can go to SoundCloud or YouTube and look up The Right Life. That's WRITE
Okay.
Life. And you'll find those songs on those pages. One is called My Reflections. The other one is called Ride It Out.
Write it out.
Trying this thing out at the crib, get over this Rona, you know what I'm saying? But if anybody wants to learn more about the Dannon Project, they can always go to dannonproject.org. That's DANNON project.org to learn more about the great work that we do, and also to donate if that's what you're compelled to do. So.
Oh, thank you for that. I'm definitely going to include links to that in the video description here. Gosh, the example you set of taking time to engage with your community in this particular way is so powerful. And I wish that more public figures would actually get their hands dirty with stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's incredible. There is a focus right now, and we alluded to this a little bit earlier, on shall we say, the personal lives and personal beliefs of public figures.
Right.
But I do feel like there's a mismatch between, like, we want our celebrities to believe the right things versus wanting the celebrities to actually be kind and be serving and oriented toward creating real and meaningful change. And I was wondering if you would expand on that just a little bit, what you feel like the roles of artists as public figures are. Is it okay if I, as an artist, just don't want to worry about the example I'm setting? Where do you come down on that, Alvin, as somebody who is pretty involved as a public figure?
I do believe that it's a responsibility as you elevate to uplift. I say, as I elevate, I uplift. That's a personal mantra for me. And I believe that it should, this is my belief, that you never get to where you are by yourself. Even though I wrote a song called By Myself, it was a proclamation that in spite of rejection, I'll still go forward if I have to. But I could not have made it to this point by myself, nor should I go any further alone, right? This is not how it's designed to be. So everything about my success, I'm thinking about who's watching me. My children first and foremost, my family first and foremost, but who can I influence? Because when you make it to a certain level of success, you are given the responsibility of influence, and you should use it responsibly. I'm one of those people who say, hey, you don't exist or get to fame in a fishbowl where it's like, hey, I didn't need my fans, their opinion shouldn't matter. So I do believe that there's a certain level of responsibility. Now, on the flip side, I don't believe in the chains that are put on public figures by people saying, hey, because I need you to influence me, here's what you should think. Here's what you should say. Here's what you should believe. I don't like that, because you strip people of their First Amendment rights, which is to say what's on their mind, which is probably what got them there in the first place. So I don't believe in that. There's a balance between my social responsibility and society's responsibility to allow me to be free, right? So there's a balance, and we have to meet in the middle with a compromise that says, don't, because I've made it to a certain point of success, that now I'm if I say one wrong thing, if I get it wrong one time, you're gonna cancel me, right? You're gonna take it all back. Now, as hard as it was to get here, you're gonna take it back because I disagree with you, right? I don't think that's fair either. You know what I mean? So I believe that there's a compromise that has to happen. It says, if you want people of influence to give back, let them be free to do so. You know what I mean? Be more forgiving when people make mistakes. You know what I'm saying? Because when you're not famous and you make mistakes, you have an opportunity to get it right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That freedom should not be taken away, the freedom to get things wrong.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. I mean, in a liberal democratic society, we want to be able to disagree peaceably, and that inherently means just like being okay with our neighbor not sharing our religion or our beliefs about vaccines or anything. And the vaccine debate in particular is so interesting because I'm like, if I'm Miley Cyrus or maybe Kyrie Irving, is that the sports figure that has been in the news? But yeah, if I'm one of these two people, what do I know about vaccines? Why does it matter even what I think about vaccines? You know, did I become a doctor all of a sudden when I got my celebrity card? Like, why would anyone take me seriously? And it has been so interesting to watch public figures get scrutinized and in some cases kind of eaten alive based on what they feel about an issue that is important. Yes, we could say it's important, but also not really in their domain in the first place. And I have a little bit of pity on some of these guys right now because the pressure to speak out and the pressure to say something about something that's not in your expertise is just immense, you know?
But it also comes as a part of the job though. You know what I mean? So I would never expect to be successful and not have the responsibility that come with it. Same way if I'm the CEO of a company, which I am, I'm responsible for everyone. I have a different level of accountability as a CEO and owner of a business than the people that are clocking in and clocking out, right? It's a different level. To whom much is given, much is required. And so you can't escape it and just say, well, give me the fame and the influence, but don't give me the responsibility of it.
Yeah.
So I think it is slightly irresponsible not to consider that you're not regular anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? You're not regular anymore. So
you're not regular anymore.
No.
That's what Moses found himself in that situation in the Old Testament because he wasn't able to enter the promised land due to blowing up at the people of Israel once. He had one blow up. He made one mistake after all the thing that the people did that was messed up and fickle and silly and not serving the God that they wanted to serve. Moses blows up one time and he can't go into the promised land that he led these people into. And I looked at that in a kid and I was like, that's so unfair. You know, when you're 10 years old, you're like, what? But that's the dude. Like Moses is a dude. Like you're telling me he doesn't deserve to have a little bit of that success. But no, to whom much is given, much is required. And you're so right about that. You can't just turn off that switch and say, yeah, well, I got all the perks of being famous, but I don't want all this other stuff that comes with it.
That's right. And unfortunately, a lot of people become famous without first either being trained on that or not embracing that reality. But that is what it is. And I have a publicist, and they, what they love about me is I think everything through. I make sure that I can stand behind what comes out of my mouth. You know what I mean? Because once it's out, you can't take it back. So I think about these things all the time, on all of my views, be it politics, be it a certain issue. I say, well, what's going to keep me grounded enough to where I'm confident to say what I feel, but with respect for the responsibilities of the position I'm in. You know what I mean? Because it's so easy to step on that eggshell, but how can I walk in a world of eggshells and eggs and just, deal with it in a way where I can get some scrambled eggs and I control the eggs. Eggs don't control me, baby.
I love that, Alvin.
So
I love that. That's so good. What is the company that you run? Can I ask?
Oh, I run me. And I run me.
You run me.
I run me.
The enterprise of Alvin Garrett.
As my man say, I'm a business man. Okay?
I'm a business man.
Yes.
Yes. So does that encompasses your music, I guess probably your Right Life work as well, just the entire Alvin Garrett enterprise.
Yes.
Anything in that enterprise that we haven't mentioned?
Yes. Well, I have a company called the Music Caterers, which does weddings, corporate events, subcontracting bands for private events. I started that when I was in college, worked corporate America for 2 years before making that great leap into entrepreneurship. So even before, touring and production and writing, I built a business, a service business for weddings and corporate events to where I was able to sustain myself as I learned to write and record. And so I tell people all the time, don't leave your day job for this music business. You got to pay bills. But so I created my own day job built around music, lugging around equipment, playing at weddings, bars late at night. That was not the most glamorous aspect of my career, but I appreciated it because it allowed me to invest in the studio equipment, to invest in the time I needed to develop as a songwriter and still take care of myself and the family. So I always tell people, find a formula that works for you. Some people say I'm gonna wait tables. at the end of the day, to get to that dream, it ain't always clean. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For me, I made the decision that I would do the dirty part of it all. You know what I'm saying? I'll get out there and run my own music business to the point where I can be a brand myself. So this is something I've been developing for 20 years to be Alvin Garrett, the Alvin Garrett, to where my name, my brand, my music has value, you know? So it's been a process for me.
Oh yeah, you got to be really scrappy. And I think there's an expectation that if you're doing music, quote unquote, professionally, it's going to be glamorous and cool all the time. But you don't understand. I mean, at a wedding gig, I guess at a wedding gig, they're listening to you more than, but like at a restaurant gig, you're just background music. And that can hurt your ego a little bit if you're like, oh, I got into this to be a star. I didn't want to do like a day job version of music, you know? But yeah, and it's cool to see, especially in this day and age when consumer grade technology is such that a lot of us can have recording careers without having a label. I mean, it's easier to do it without a label to some degree. You don't have someone breathing down your neck. But that does, I mean, it's an expensive career path. And so you have to have that job that can subsidize your other job. And for me, that's oil and gas. It took a weird turn in my life to get there. But I feel really lucky because like you, I had this, you know, this drive and in some ways I'm very, very passionate about that as well. Mm-hmm. So, okay, I want to do some rapid fire questions. All right. Just get some quick takes on a couple issues that I like to ask artists about when I meet them. Why do you think, Alvin, that most artists lean blue?
You know, I hadn't even checked with them. I don't check in to find out if they're blue or red. So I might not have the right answer for that, you know, because certain artists lean one way or the other. You may have gospel and Christian artists that may lean right. You know, you may have, you know, rap artists that lean left. Honestly, I didn't know that most artists lean blue, to be honest. I didn't.
Oh, God bless you. I actually like that take. They absolutely do. So I'm very sensitive to it. I just feel whenever I'm in a music scene situation, I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely the only one who feels this way about energy policy or tax policy or whatever. And not that it matters, it doesn't. But it's funny because artists, like we were saying, like to be really outspoken about issues. And I mean, can you imagine if like, I guess this kind of happened with Kanye West and a little bit of Lil Wayne as well. But like when those guys went Trump, even Trump adjacent, it was like, big deal, big deal.
Well, I could, now here's what I would say that the industry itself may lean more blue. And there may be pressure to take on more liberal values in the music and the lifestyle, you know, as opposed to more conservative values, because my music is technically more conservative. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about partying and drinking all night long. I'm talking about. I agree with that, yeah. So that if you listen to my music, it is slightly more aligned with conservative values in terms of, you know, having a relationship with one person, monogamy type of stuff. That's not a liberal type of, you know what I mean? I'm just saying, let's party, you know, that's not conservative. You know what I mean? So maybe because of what sells in the marketplace, a little bit more appealing to the younger demographic or whatever sex sells, you know, sex, drugs, rock and roll may be more of a left-leaning concept, right, of life. So maybe that's why you may say, well, there's a connection between a person's, you know, how they lean based on what sells, right? More easily mainstream music, right? That's
a super interesting take. That is, I've never even thought about that and considered it.
Right.
That's awesome. Quick take number 2. Right. And this is related. In fact, given your answer to that one, you might not even have a coherent one to answer to this one either. Can you name any musicians across the aisle? And I guess this is a weird question for you now that I'm thinking about it, because you don't really place yourself on any aisle. You're just like, I'm here, I'm me.
Yeah. Well, I'll say, let me see. Of course, I have a diverse group of artistic friends, right? I just do. And certainly in music, you know, if I were to ask, you know, some of my white friends, you know, hey, who do you vote for? Oh, I'm Trump all the way. You know what I mean? Then you might ask people like, man, are you crazy? Right? But I don't lead those relationships with political affiliations. So I couldn't say for sure who goes which way or what, or the other in terms of that particular type of conversation, because it's just never been a part of my interactions with other artists.
This is the best. Normally, I feel like these questions are much more challenging in a different way to artists, because they literally don't even know someone across the aisle from them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
At least this is my case in LA. Maybe your zip code lends itself to a different situation, but I love that that's your response. You don't lead with politics, so why does that even matter to some degree? These are people. Well, to embarrass myself with yet another quick take that is not as relevant to you as it would be maybe to other artists, what's an issue that you've changed your mind on about in the last couple of years?
An issue that I've changed my mind on in the past couple of years. Welfare. All right.
Tell me more.
Tell you more. All right. The more I learned about the intricate details in terms of qualifying for welfare, I began to lose an affinity for it, because it leads to family desecration. If the father of your child moves in, you lose certain services. I don't agree with that, and I've known a lot of people growing up who benefit from welfare services. So I'm a big proponent of supporting those who need to be supported, but I am not a proponent of telling somebody they can't unite their family in order to make a better life. So it leads to separation of family by policy and by implementation. So I have sort of evolved my views on that since I learned more about it, because I've never been on it, right? I've been blessed never to have to be on it. But as I started, learning more about the people we serve and start realizing that, wait a minute, these two families can't, you start seeing these things. And a lot of times this is not top of mind knowledge as to what these qualifications and requirements are to qualify for certain public assistance. And so to me, that I don't agree with, to be honest with you.
That's super interesting that you say that, Alvin. Yeah, social support, social services are such a complex issue. And I feel like both the right and the left tend to have their just stereotypical opinions. There's the welfare queen legend that makes Republicans get all up in arms, like these people are just throwing their money away. And then, and on the left, there might be an idealization of how the stuff works and how it's being used. And yes, we want to support people, and how could there ever be any unintended consequences for that? And I like that you have thought to yourself, well, what is the unintended consequence of this? Might there be some side of this that we didn't see or want that might be backfiring in some way? I think we could all do well to ask ourselves, what is the potential to backfire of our favorite policy, whatever it is? What is the dark side of it? Could there be something I'm missing?
Yeah, and what can we do to make it work? How can we meet in the middle to make it work? How can we refine this to where the strength of family is a part of the policy, because that's just a fundamental belief to me. And you know what I mean? That, family is strong, regardless of how that family is made up. Two people coming together to support a family is stronger than one person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so anything that helps strengthen family, regardless of the makeup. And I truly believe that. I don't care if it's two men, two women, a man, a woman, I don't care. A family is stronger when you have two people leading together to lead their children in a positive direction. It's just stronger, in so many different ways. So that's a fundamental belief of mine, because I was fortunate to grow up in a two-parent home. And I know that gave me a foundation that I don't believe I would have had otherwise. Doesn't discount, those who don't have that. So I'm very sensitive to it. But I believe that is something that we should strengthen, and support.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree. Alvin, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm so grateful for you, man. It's such an encouragement to talk to an artist who has such a great heart and such a good head on their shoulders too, which Yeah, you're just one of a kind. I wonder what's coming next for you. I know you just released this album. Touring is
Mhm.
kind of challenged right now. I don't know if you have plans to tour maybe in the spring. I've seen some artists kind of coming out of the woodwork to do live shows. What can we expect from you next?
As of this recording, I've just finished my fourth show here in the past month or so. So I've been sort of easing back out on the road, doing as safely as possible. Did a series of live stream concerts that I produced during the height of the pandemic. Now that things are becoming a little bit safer, I've been sort of reaching out to a lot of relationships in different markets that I've built over the years, saying, let me tour in the Southeast where I can just kind of drive, get in and out, just to get the wheels turning again in expectation of a full-blown movement in 2022. So I'm hoping to get about 10 cities in before Thanksgiving. So I got about 6 more that I'm, like I say, focusing on in the Southeast, kind of in and out type of thing. Just getting this music out there and just making people feel good and building the narrative for 2022.
That's fantastic. Where can people find out whether you're coming to their town? Do you have a list of tour dates and cities yet?
I always say check my website, alvingarrett.com, and follow me on social media, which is the Alvin Garrett. And that's put a THE in front of the Alvin Garrett. And that'll lead you to all my social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And I keep things updated as they come through. And as an independent artist, it's very fluid. I'll be honest with you. I don't have a major company just pushing me out here. This is me and a team of people that believe in me and what I stand for. And so as things develop, we keep them posted and keep everybody that's following me and believing in me posted on where we are and what we're doing.
Fantastic. Well, I trust that all of our listeners are going to go and connect with you on those platforms. Do you have a mailing list or anything, or is social media the best way to get in touch?
Well, I do actually have an email list on my website, so we can sign up and subscribe for that. And we send out newsletters. Yeah.
I will invite everybody to do that in the link below. Until then, have an amazing tour, Alvin. Thank you again for joining us, and I wish you the absolute best in what's coming down the pike.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Where are we marching? Do we know where the road's gonna end? Who are we following? Are we further than where we began? Who are we watching? Are we sure that they're really a friend? Why are we hollering? Oh, no. That's not how we're gonna win. It starts in the heart. That's where the journey begins.